Daniel Dale is out front now to fact check those claims that you just heard from Republicans. And Daniel, obviously, George Soros is a longtime supporter of Democratic campaigns. That has been true in case after case. But what can you tell us specifically about the relationship between George Soros and Alvin Bragg?
So there is no sign of a personal relationship between Soros and Bragg. A Soros spokesman told me Soros has never once communicated with Bragg in any way, not in person, not on the phone, not even on Zoom. And Soros did not make any donations to Bragg's 2021 election campaign. Soros did, however, Aaron, play an indirect role in that Bragg campaign by making donations to a PAC, Political Action Committee, that supported Bragg. Now, here are the specifics. Soros is, again, a longtime supporter of criminal justice reform and DA candidates promoting that reform. And his spokesman told me that Soros and an affiliated PAC gave $4 million between 2016 and 2022, including $1 million in May 2021, not specifically earmarked in support of Bragg, but $1 million in May 2021, to a racial justice PAC called Color of Change, which, like Soros, also backs reform-minded DA candidates around the country. Now, Color of Change tells me it ended up spending just over $500,000, so not over $1 million, but just over $500,000 in support of that.
A photograph from just one day along the Rio Grande of hundreds of thousands of people walking across the border. You have allowed this to happen. The photograph that was before, what are these wristbands?
I don't know what they are.
You
Senator.
don't know what they are. Mr. Secretary, you have just testified to the American people you're incompetent at your job, because I've been to the southern border, and if you go to the southern border, along the southern border, you see thousands of these wristbands because the illegal immigrants wear them. The drug cartels, every color corresponds to how many thousands of dollars they owe the cartels. You have turned these cartels into multi-billion-dollar criminal organizations, and these are modern-day leg irons because these are children being sold into sex slavery, and you don't even know what they are. That is astonishing. Mr. Secretary, how many children have been sold into sex slavery under your administration?
Senator, we are taking it to the cartels.
How many children have been sold into sex slavery? Do you know how many children have been sold into sex slavery?
To an unprecedented degree.
Mr. Secretary, I want to say to you right now, your behavior is disgraceful, and the deaths, the children assaulted, the children raped, they are at your feet, and if you had integrity, you would resign. And I will tell you, the men and women of the Border Patrol, they've never had a political leader undermine them. They despise you, Mr. Secretary, because you're willing to let children be raped to follow political orders. This is a crisis, it's a disgrace, and you won't even admit this human tragedy is a crisis.
Claiming 1 minute chairman time, Mr. Secretary, would you like to respond to any of those questions?
What the senator said was revolting. I'm not going to address it.
Your refusal to do your job is revolting.
It's just me. I'm good. You got me. I'm good. I'm coming. I'm good. Trust me, I'm good. Go ahead.
You crying! You fucking crying, bitch! Fuck you! Fuck you! Fuck you! Trans rights are human rights!
Trans rights are human fucking rights!
Bye, bitch! Bye, bitch! You're dressed like a communist.
Back up!
Fuck you! Fuck you! Trans women are women! 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 Trans women are women!
Drop the discard. s'appelle ce morceau?
这曲子叫什么呢？
流水就是高山流水，千年古琴呐、奏的是这个千年绝唱，高山流水盼知音呐、它是一个古代的一个很优美的故事，俞伯牙与钟子期的故事，体现是知音，只有知音才能听得懂它这个曲子。
Je prendrai moi le nom du morceau avec les textes, si vous pouvez me les récupérer.
总统想把这个曲子的名字记下来。
记一下可以，包括曲名或者你有那个简谱的那个，可以复印一下。
Supreme Court justice of this court has been receiving hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of gifts and expenses and having lifestyle subsidies by a billionaire who has been funding the same types of judicial organizations that appointed this judge in a partisan ruling in the first place.
I'm going to get to that in a second. I just want to stick with abortion first. And what you just heard me ask the secretary about was something that you called on the Biden administration to do, which is just to simply ignore the court ruling. That's a pretty stunning position if you think about it in the abstract, about the notion of just ignoring a judge's position. So my question is, when this case is resolved by the Supreme Court, should the administration follow that decision if that decision ends up banning this abortion drug?
Well, you know, I want to take a step back and dig into the grounds around ignoring this preliminary ruling as well. There is an extraordinary amount of precedent for this. There is a term known as agency non-acquiescence. And this has been used and for folks saying this is a first, that this is precedent setting. It is not. The Trump administration also did this very thing, but also it has happened before. The idea of consistency in governance until there is a higher court ruling is not an unprecedented thing to happen. In fact, when the Trump administration did it, it was arguably through a much, a very grave issue when it came to DACA. The Trump administration was ordered to fully reinstate DACA, the DACA program, and they, in a complete defiance, did not do that. They rely on, the courts rely on the legitimacy of their rulings. And when they make a mockery of our system, a mockery of our democracy, and a mockery of our law, as what we just saw happen in this mifepristone ruling, then I believe that the executive branch, and we know that the executive branch has an enforcement discretion, especially in light of a contradicting ruling coming out of Washington.
And the lack of press conference that we see in general from this White House. I represent a news organization that owns 113 television stations, and a question that I'm often asked, and I don't know the answer to, so I'll ask you that question. Is the administration trying to protect the president from our questions? Please, answer
Absolutely
that question.
not. Absolutely not.
So why the lack of any interaction in a formal setting to have a press conference?
I mean, the president takes shouted questions. I understand, John. I understand. I've dealt with this question about 3 times already. I understand. It is the job of you all to ask this question to me. Totally get that, and that's not a problem at all. But certainly, The president many times has stood in front of all of you, has taken questions on his own, because he wanted to see what was all on your minds. He wanted to see what the questions you all were going to ask him, and he wanted to answer them directly. That has happened multiple times, many times during this administration, and that will certainly continue to be. When it comes to a formal press conference, I don't have anything to share with you at this time.
Just one last thing.
Yeah, sure.
Just to button it up. You recognize that as it relates to prior administrations, the president's predecessor, President Obama, President George W. Bush. I've been here long enough to have covered President Bill Clinton. This is not the norm. The norm is we do get an opportunity to ask the questions to the president about domestic and foreign policy issues in a formal setting at some point. And you choose that point, but we haven't had that opportunity in quite some time.
So I'll say this, it is also unprecedented that a president takes as many shouted questions as this president has, and he has.
I know the last administration, but I'll tell you, almost every day I'll be
Okay, well, we'll certainly get the data and share that with all of you. I hear, John, I hear your question, I heard Zeke's question, I hear you. I hear you on the press conference, on a formal press conference. We get this probably every couple of months when you guys ask us about a formal press conference. I don't have anything to share with all of you at this time, and I'll just leave it there.
Content you don't like or hateful? What do you mean to describe a hateful thing?
Yeah, I mean, you know, just content that will solicit a reaction, something that may include something that is slightly racist or slightly sexist, those kinds of things.
So you think if something is slightly sexist, it should be banned?
No,
is that what you're saying?
I'm not saying anything. I'm saying.
Well, I'm just curious. I'm trying to understand what you mean by hateful content. And I'm asking for specific examples. And you just said that if something is slightly sexist, that's hateful content. Does that mean that it should be banned?
Well, you've asked me whether my feed, whether it's got less or more. I'd say it's got slightly more.
That's why I'm asking for examples. Can you name one example?
I honestly don't use. Honestly, I don't.
You can't name a single example.
I'll tell you why. Because I don't actually use that feed anymore. Because I just don't particularly like it.
But you
and
said
actually, a lot of people are quite similar. I only look at
hang on a second.
following.
You said you've seen more hateful content, but you can't name a single example, not even one.
I'm not sure I've used that feed for the last 3 or 4 weeks. And
well, then how did you see that hateful content?
Because I've been using Twitter since you've taken it over for the last 6 months.
Okay, so then you must have at some point seen for you hateful content. I'm asking for one example.
Right.
And you can't give a single one.
And I'm saying
then I say, sir, that you don't know what you're talking about.
Really?
Yes, because you can't give me a single example of hateful content, not even one tweet, and yet you claimed that the hateful content was high.
Well,
that's false.
No, what I claimed.
You just lied.
What I claimed was. There are many organizations that say that kind of information is on the rise. Now, whether it has on my feed or not, I mean, right, and
literally
if you look at something
one.
like the Strategic Dialogue Institute in the UK, they will say that. So
look, people will say all sorts of nonsense. I'm literally asking for a single example, and you can't name one.
Right, and as I already said, I don't use that feed. But
then how would you know that?
I don't think this is getting anywhere.
You literally said you experienced more hateful content, and then couldn't name a single example.
Right, and as I said,
that's absurd.
I haven't actually looked at that feed.
Then how would you know there's hateful content?
Because I'm saying that's what I saw a few weeks ago. I can't give you an exact example. Let's move on. We only have a certain amount of time.
Wow.
Mike McCormick worked for Joe Biden as a White House stenographer, and Mike joins us now. So, Mike, what went down on that trip that you're aware of?
Thanks for having me on, Jesse. Well, what happened on that trip was Joe Biden was in the front of the plane. My job as a White House stenographer was to be in the back of the plane in the press cabin. And if Joe or a senior administration official came back and did a briefing, and then I would record it and make a transcript. Well, that's exactly what happened. That senior administration official was Jake Sullivan, who's now our national security advisor. So I didn't see anything wrong with it at the time. Years go by. I've left the White House. I'm writing books, and I get a hold of the Hunter Biden laptop from Marco Polo. They're a nonprofit, anti-corruption nonprofit. About 1.5 years ago, I started writing a Substack based on what I find. And then I go back over what I knew happened when I was working for Joe. I found the transcript that I wrote about that briefing. That's when Jake Sullivan starts talking about fracking. And because of what I'd read in the laptop and reported in my Substack previously, I'm like, wait a minute. Joe Biden knew Hunter Biden was already on the board on April 18th. Joe Biden knew. He directed Sullivan to go back and talk to the press. This is a conspiracy. This is a crime. This is public corruption. That's what the FBI is supposed to investigate. So I wrote a Substack about it in November. Nothing happened. I went to the FBI and filled out their witness tip line. There's a website. You fill out all these tips, these web directions. I submitted it. If you lie to the FBI when you're submitting a tip like that, you can go to jail. I'm not lying. I'm telling the truth. Joe Biden is lying. Joe Biden is a criminal. That's the bottom line. I don't care if he goes to Timbuktu or Ireland or anywhere. He's a criminal. And I've got the evidence. If they put me in front of the grand jury that's right now seated in Wilmington with Special Prosecutor David Weiss, my testimony becomes the evidence that will put him in jail or will lead to his impeachment. Probably lead to his impeachment first.
So you're saying that Joe Biden wasn't going to Ukraine to fight corruption. Joe Biden was going to Ukraine to help the natural gas industry. At the time, he knew that his son was on the board of the biggest natural gas business conglomerate in Ukraine.
That's exactly right. You know, Hunter Biden signed up for this trip. He signed up to be on Burisma on April 18th, 2014. Well, on April 16th, 2014, what I've seen in the laptop was Hunter put a schedule, something on his daily schedule. I'm meeting Devin and Lucas. Lucas, Devin Archer's son. Devin Archer is a fellow Burisma board member at the WH at 11. That's the White House. There's photos of Devin Archer and his son Lucas in the White House. The cover story was, oh, it's a book report for my son. He's being nice with Joe Biden. That's not what it was. This was a planning meeting for them to start their kickback scheme with Burisma. And there was a lot more planning that went on ahead of it.
Nike sponsoring Dylan Mulvaney now for fucking sports bras, okay? I'm sorry. Dylan doesn't have breasts. Dylan's been taking some sort of a hormone that has turned Dylan into some, I don't know what's happening there, but those are not breasts. And Dylan doesn't need any sort of a bra, never mind a sports bra. The three ladies on this program right now have 6 boobs between us, and we actually know what it's like to wear a bra, and no one would be inspired to buy one based on non-breasted Dylan Mulvaney prancing around in a Nike sports bra. By the way, Dylan also appears to have an eating disorder. I'm just going to say it. But Dylan is about 40 pounds soaking wet. So this should not be anybody's spokesperson for anything.
For centuries, they have helped shape world civilization, and in the last decades, they have really transformed the economy of their country, lifting more than 800 million people out of poverty in the last 45 years.
As Ireland remembers what it means to have to flee home, leaving everything behind to begin again on foreign shores, the Irish people have generously opened their hearts, their homes, and you've welcomed, as you said, nearly 80,000 Ukrainian refugees. I would argue the rest of the world has an obligation to help you maintain that. Our economic plan is working. We now have to finish the job, but there's more to do. And you're leading the way. Shovels in the ground, cranes in the air, factories opening, all those jobs meaning we were created. Let me be clear. In my administration, no one earning less than $400,000 a year will see their tax bill go up a single solitary penny, nor will they. No one.
Good afternoon, Chairman McClintock, Ranking Member DePaul, and distinguished members of the committee.
It is an honor to be here. I thank you for the invitation to share my testimony. My goal is to inspire action to safeguard the lives of migrant children, including the staggering 85,000 that are missing. Today, children will work overnight shifts at slaughterhouses, factories, restaurants to pay their debts to smugglers and traffickers. Today, children will be sold for sex. Today, children will call a hotline to report they are being abused, neglected, and trafficked, and we don't know if they're going to get the help they need. For nearly a decade, unaccompanied children have been suffering in the shadows, and I have to confess I knew nothing about their suffering until 2021 when I volunteered to help the Biden administration with the crisis at the southern border. As part of Operation Artemis, I was deployed to the Pomona Fairplex Emergency Intake Site in California to help HHS, Office of Refugee Resettlement, reunite children with sponsors in the United States. I thought I was going to help place children in loving homes. Instead, I discovered that children are being trafficked through a sophisticated network that begins with recruiting in home country, smuggling to the U.S. border, and ends when ORR delivers a child to a sponsor. Some sponsors are criminals and traffickers and members of transnational criminal organizations. Some sponsors view children as commodities and assets to be used for earning income. This is why we are witnessing an explosion of labor trafficking. Now, whether it's intentional or not, it could be argued that the United States government has become the middleman in a large-scale, multi-billion-dollar child trafficking operation that is run by bad actors seeking to profit off of the lives of children. As for me, my interest is the safety of the children. I do not view this as a political issue. I view this as a humanitarian issue. I assure you, my motives are the highest and best. I want the children protected. So I want to tell you some of what I witnessed personally at the Pomona Fairplex. I saw vulnerable indigenous children from Guatemala who speak Mayan dialects and cannot speak Spanish. That means they cannot ask for help in English. They cannot ask for help in Spanish. They become captives of their sponsors. I have sat with case managers as they've cried to tell me the horror of what has happened to children as they make the journey to this country. I saw apartment buildings where 20, 30, and 40 unaccompanied minors have been released. I saw sponsors trying to simultaneously sponsor children from multiple ORR sites at one time. I saw sponsors using multiple addresses to obtain sponsorships of children. And I saw numerous cases of children in debt bondage, and the child knew they had to stay with the sponsor until the debt was paid. Realizing that we were not offering the children the American dream, but instead putting them in modern-day slavery with wicked overlords was a terrible revelation. A terrible revelation. These children are a captive victim population with no access to law enforcement or knowledge of their rights. They are extorted, abused, neglected, and that is why I blew the whistle in 2021. I witnessed firsthand the horrors of child trafficking and exploitation. My life will never be the same after what I saw, but I have hope because I'm counting on you. It's my hope that you'll take action to end this crisis, to safeguard the lives of these vulnerable children. People have asked me, what can be done? What would you suggest? Well, first, I think HHS's #1 priority is oversight. They must commit to oversight, transparency, and accountability. If I could wave a magic wand, this, I believe, could be quickly solved by experts in the IG community. There is a Pandemic Analytics Center of Excellence, or the PACE, as we call it. I believe if data analysts at the PACE could look at the data, children could be rescued, criminals could be prosecuted. If the PACE had access to this data, it shows where the children are and who has them. I think also we need to change the culture of speed over safety. Speed is the wrong performance measure when dealing with children. We need to revamp the vetting process of sponsors and have case managers who have investigative backgrounds, data analytics backgrounds, some certified fraud examiners. And I think we need to reimagine a system where the sponsor is the accountable party. Sponsors should be required to report to ORR. And lastly, stop retaliating against whistleblowers. Stop retaliating against the people who are trying to tell the truth to save the children. As it is written, a wise man listens to advice, while a fool continues in his folly, and HHS needs to be wise to care for these children.
Thank you very much.
Do you think at least one time you'd get up and say, I'm running for president? Where am I going? Where the hell am I going? I want to get out. Oh, no, over there, over there. Most inconceivable that Biden would have even thought of running for re-election. He's destroyed our country, and yet he says in his recorded piece that he wants to finish the job. That's right, he wants to finish the job of destroying our country. But on that, he's actually very close. He is very close to finishing the job, unfortunately. So many different things we did. We did a great job. We never got credit for that one. They give Biden credit. He doesn't know he's alive. I mean, jeez. And very sadly, there's never been talk like what you're hearing now, because this guy doesn't have a clue how to speak. He's too tough when he should be soft. He's too soft when he should be tough. He says things that are so bad, provokes, and then shows weakness. It's the craziest thing. He says just the opposite of what you have to say. I will be retiring the name Crooked from Hillary Clinton and her moniker. And I'm going to give her a new name, I don't know, like maybe Lovely Hillary or Beautiful Hillary. But I'm going to retire the name Crooked so that we can use the name for Joe Biden, because he'll be known from now on as Crooked Joe Biden.
Freedom. Personal freedom is fundamental to who we are as Americans. But you know, around the country, MAGA extremists are lining up to take on those bedrock freedoms. Cutting Social Security that you paid for your entire life while cutting taxes for the very wealthy. Dictating what health care decisions women can make. Banning books and telling people who they can love. This is not a time to be complacent. That's why I'm running for re-election.